Will someone who did announcements or a pulpit editorial return my sermon to the pulpit? Look amongst the papers of the announcements or of the pulpit editorial. War, I'm agin it.
I see right there, he's right on something about being guilty. Sorry, Charlie.
You're not the first and you won't be the last. This is... $2,874 people were killed by terrorists on September 11, 2001. 4,261 Americans have died in Iraq since March 2003. These numbers have nothing to do with each other. Iraq had nothing to do with the attack on New York and Washington, D.C., yet somehow we ended up in war in Iraq 6 years ago this week. I remember 100,000 of us marching in Washington before the invasion twice. We knew this was the wrong war, but few were listening. The media were beating the drums of war, singing the sterilized glorification of when Johnny comes marching again, and not all the reality verses that our choir sang to us today. Any objections were unpatriotic. I know that some radio stations even took songs so radical as Imagine off their playlist because it would offend the sensibilities of a nation set for war. We were told Iraqis were planning to make nuclear weapons. When the UN weapons inspectors found no weapons of mass destruction, they warned them to get out because the bombing was going to start anyway. All the reasons we were given for this war have proved false. And now we are told we are building a stable democracy. We added more troops because it was getting too violent. And now that it is less violent, some argue that we have to keep troops there or else it will get violent again. There was an election in 2006, and it seemed like those who wanted the war to end had spoken. Yet the war dragged on. There was an election in 2008, and a candidate who spoke out against the war won. And now he says we're there for at least 19 more months. And even then, there might be 1/3 of our troops left as a residual non-combat force. I don't know what that means. Because anybody who's in danger and is carrying a gun, I think, is a combat troop. Our nation fought World War II for 4 years. Do we need to be in Iraq for 8 years or more? The Friends Committee on National Legislation lists the following timetable for withdrawal as it currently stands. In January 2009, there are 142,000 troops and 163,000 contractors. Obama has pledged to withdraw from Iraq 1 to 2 combat brigades a month, which would remove all of them in 16 months. That has been adjusted to 19 months now. In June 30th of this year, U.S. combat forces will withdraw from Iraqi cities and towns according to the U.S.-Iraq agreement. An unspecified number of non-combat U.S. troops may remain in all Iraqi cities and towns. In July 2009, Iraqis hold a popular vote to decide if U.S. forces will be allowed to stay outside of the cities until the end of 2011. If Iraqis vote in favor of the U.S.-Iraq withdrawal agreements, all troops will be required to withdraw by December 2011. If they vote against the agreement, the present agreement will only allow U.S. troops to stay until a year after a vote, or August 2010, and a new agreement will have to be negotiated. By May 2010, President Obama has pledged to withdraw all combat forces from Iraq. Residual forces of 37,000 to 89,500 will remain. December 31st, 2011, all forces to leave Iraq by this date, pending the outcome of the vote. And of course, any of these steps along the way can be delayed if the situation on the ground changes and is deemed too dangerous to leave. But what if it is too dangerous to stay? Each day we stay is another day of resentment. We are an occupying force that was uninvited. Some people wonder why the Iraqis are not more grateful. There may be a reason. Now, the Ba'ath Party took power in Iraq in 1961, and Saddam Hussein took over leadership of that party in 1979. And these were not good people. Genocide Watch, a website that reports all the genocides that have happened since World War II, reports that 190,000 people were killed between 1961 and 2003. Since the U.S. invasion, civilian deaths range from around 91,000 on the low end, listed by Iraqi body count, to over 1 million by the Opinion Business Research Survey of London. So far, we are only half as bad as the Ba'athist Party, or 5 times as bad. But we've only been there 6 years. We could make things worse, but it's hard to see how we could make things better. Our presence prevents Iraqis from truly having self-rule. And it gives legitimacy to freedom fighters. Some of you last year and some of you this year might feel that America has an unpopular president, someone you might not be satisfied with. If Russia came and deposed a president you were dissatisfied with, would you let them stay longer to help us build a new government? On top of the deaths, there's a huge refugee problem. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees News Service says the lack of political solution to the sectarian deadlock is a primary cause of the growing number of refugees in a war-torn country. In Iraq, with the sectarian divide and lack of comprehensive political solution, the number of internally displaced people rose from 1.8 million to the close of 2.4 million by the end of the year. And that was in 2007. By comparison, 2.5 million have been displaced in Darfur. Any fingers that we might point at the Sudanese government definitely have three fingers pointing back at us. I could talk about all the money this war is costing, but it will cost a lot of money to bring troops home. I could talk about how stretched our troops are and that we'll have to spend even more money to care for all those injured and traumatized by this war. And even if we stop spending money on troops in Iraq, we probably need to keep spending money in Iraq. After all, we broke their country. We owe them. But we should not stay. Not because of the cost, not because of the killing, not because of the refugees. We should leave because it is wrong for us to be there. It is strategically wrong, it is politically wrong, it is morally wrong, it is spiritually wrong. It's strategically wrong because we currently lack the money and the troops to sustain the current stalemates, let alone resettle refugees. It's strategically wrong, for each day we spend as an occupying power, we are a recruiting tool for anti-American terrorists. It's strategically wrong because the solution is a political one and not a military one. Using the military to rebuild a civil society is like using a lawnmower to clean your house. Even with the leaf bags sucking up the stuff that you break, you're never going to get the house clean. A lawnmower is the wrong tool for the job. Militaries are useful for building dictatorship, but civilian control is necessary for democracy. Staying in Iraq is politically wrong. The Iraqi legislature has voted to have us leave. If we truly believe that we have created an independent democracy, then we should start treating them like one. The majority of Americans now feel it was wrong to go there. It's politically wrong because we have no credibility with the Iraqi people. How can we expect them to believe that we support human rights when we have trampled on theirs? It is politically wrong because the world has watched us betray our principles. The politically correct thing is to stop doing wrong and ask forgiveness. The politically correct thing is also the morally correct thing. It is morally wrong to stay in Iraq because they have the right to self-determination. It is morally wrong to kill people. It is morally wrong to torture people. It is morally wrong to create homelessness. Every day we stay, we perpetuate the wrong we have done. The great moral law across all religions is the golden rule: to love your neighbor as yourself. Would you enjoy your neighbor forcibly occupying your house? Finally, to stay in Iraq is spiritually wrong. How does killing, torture, and displacement honor the inherent worth and dignity of Iraqis? It may be that the civil war in Iraq has them disrespecting each other, but our disrespect cannot make the situation better. We have to pause and ask ourselves, who do we want to be? We cannot be advocates of freedom if we use coercion. How can we be people of peace when we continue the war? Will we be just if we keep breaking international law? There is a spiritual need for atonement. Those who supported the war need to admit their mistake, and those who are against the war need to admit that they didn't do enough to stop it. We are all guilty. Now, guilt is not usually preached from this pulpit. But guilt is not all bad. Now, shame, I have problems with. Shame is the belief that we are bad people. I believe in our potential to be good. Sometimes, in order to be good, we have to admit that we have done bad things. That is the purpose of guilt. Guilt is realizing that we have done wrong. It makes us hit the brakes when we are going in the wrong direction. But we don't hit the brakes to stop and then wallow in shame. Sometimes guilt can lead to shame. Sometimes we want to shame others who we think are guilty. But there's a part of guilt that holds the potential for redemption. You stop in order to turn around. The meaning of the word repent, also not said much from this pulpit, means to turn around, to return to yourself, to return to the better angels of our nature. So let us return to the path of freedom, justice, and peace. Let us hold each other accountable. If we held the previous president accountable, then we must hold this president accountable. Spirituality is about following our ideals. Spirituality is no respecter of persons. The economy has taken our focus off the war because the news media seems to be able to handle one story at a time. We are probably different than most Americans in that we have read the names of fallen service personnel each week to remind ourselves that we are still at war. It doesn't disappear just because it's not in the headlines. Our lives are out of balance. And life is more than totals on a balance sheet, whether lives or money. Life is about being in balance and harmony with one another, step by step. May we walk humbly with our ultimate values. May we love mercy and do justice. Let us return to the source of our strength. Let us repent from living in fear and return to living in love. Let us repent from domination and return to cooperation. Let us repent from complacency and return to activism. Let us repent from our past and return to building the future. For 6 years, we have abandoned our principles. We have chosen an exile in Babylon. We have wandered in the desert so long that it seems normal. But war, and this war in particular, is not normal, even when the violence is defined to be at acceptable levels. It's not normal. Let us repent from our wandering and walk with purpose. Let us return to the promised land. Let us live by the promises we have made to ourselves. Let us affirm the inalienable rights of all people. Ending the Iraqi occupation will bring life. Ending the Iraqi occupation will bring liberty. May the people of the United States and the citizens of Iraq pursue happiness starting today and throughout the future. May we bless and be blessed. And listen to this hymn, this anthem. We get so caught up in our anger and our fights that we often forget that there's a whole world out there, a world of beauty that does not think like we do, a mystic harmony that we can only aspire to.